Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to have Tim Baker, founder of Script Financial, on the show today. Tim is a West Point grad and veteran who went through several different career changes after leaving the military before finding financial planning. After working in a hybrid firm, he decided to launch his own firm in April of 2016. Since then, he's added almost 50 new clients to his business with a heavy niche focus on working with pharmacists. In fact, over 70% of his clients are pharmacists, and he just teamed up with two other professionals that also focus on working with pharmacists to build out the business even more. Tim just recently was able to host a webinar through an association for pharmacists that brought in 150 registrants and gets weekly speaking inquiries from pharmacy schools to come talk to their students about personal finances. His last 18 months in business shows the true power of having a focus for your business and how opportunities that you can't even imagine may arise because you have a niche expertise. Support for today's episode comes from Ruby Receptionist, the only live remote receptionist service dedicated to helping financial service professionals win more clients and build trust. From their studio in Portland, Oregon, Ruby's friendly professional receptionists ensure exceptional client experiences by answering calls live in English or Spanish, transferring calls, taking messages, addressing common problems, collecting new client intake, making follow-up calls, and more, just like an in-house receptionist, but at a fraction of the cost. Let Ruby help you turn your rings into relationships. For a special offer, visit callruby.com/XYPN and use promo code XYPN or call 1-844-853-7829. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/138. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Tim. Hey, Tim, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alan.
Yeah, I guess like normal, we'll sort of kick it off with give listeners a bit of an overview of your business, sort of where things stand today. How long have you been open? How many clients are you serving? Where are you located? That sort of thing. Just sort of a broad stroke, and then we'll dig into the details. Yeah,
so I launched Script Financial in May of 2016. I'm located in the Baltimore, Maryland area. And yeah, I've been open for about a year and a half, going on 2 years. And I really don't count the first few months. I mean, I count them, but they're painful in terms of the numbers. But I have 45 ongoing clients over the course of the first year, mainly from May of 2016 to December of 2016. I had 18. So I brought 12 from kind of my old fee-based business. And then pretty much in my first full year, I grew from 18 clients to 42 clients, and I've added another 3 this year. So I'm at 45 at present. So that's kind of the numbers with the firm.
That's a busy year. So 2017 was a big year for you.
It was. Yeah, it definitely was.
All right. Well, I can't wait to learn more about how you manage that, because that's just phenomenal growth. Talk to me a little bit about sort of your career path and how you discovered financial planning as sort of the path to launching your own firm.
Yeah, it's a kind of a weird story. So I graduated from the United States Military Academy way back in 2005, and I studied international relations, and I was a tank platoon leader when I graduated. So not a typical path to financial planning. So my Army career, I had about a cup of coffee in the Army. I unfortunately got hurt in a training accident, and I found myself as a civilian all of a sudden. And I'd worked pretty much since I was 17 to fill this career of service and all that stuff. And it kind of just slipped away from me. And so I found myself a civilian, and I took some time off. I backpacked Europe for about 4 months, and I was interviewing with a bunch of retail companies and government agencies in terms of where I was going to land next. And I actually landed with a retailer in the Midwest, basically moving boxes from A to B. So I liked it because it was operational leadership. And, I think the company was excited and they had just gone through a major merge. And when I got back from Europe, I packed my bags from the East Coast. I'm originally from New Jersey and set out for Columbus, Ohio. And I was there for about 4 or 5 years. And I loved the job. It was one of those things where you're basically trying to figure out a puzzle of how to move products from A to B while minimizing damages and man hours and leadership and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted, something a little bit more outside of what I was doing. So I moved to the West Coast in California and worked with a construction company, kind of doing similar type of work, but with material yards. So we were building those big steel towers for power lines, basically from Southern California out to the Arizona border. So again, very different from financial planning. And it was at this time in my life that I kind of had my quarter life crisis. I had a relationship that basically ended. And, I think I was unhappy because I felt like I was working a lot. And I just feel like I didn't really reap the benefits. I didn't get that warm and fuzzy feeling from
Right.
my work. And, doing that type of work, moving things from A to B is super important, but I never really felt jacked up about what I was doing unless I was developing a team member or, having my supervisors become, get promoted and that type of thing. So I basically took stock of my situation. I quit that job and I kind of went on a mini sabbatical, and my sister had twins. So I moved back to Ohio and I helped Manny for a little bit. My brother, had come back from Malaysia where he was studying. So I stayed with them. I stayed with parents. I stayed with a West Point classmate. I learned how to snowboard out in Bend, Oregon, and started volunteering. And I started to kind of recenter myself and really try to figure out what was important to me and what I wanted to do. And I think ultimately what I discovered is I wanted to be in a profession where I felt like I was actively helping people. So I had an epiphany, and it was kind of based on what both of my siblings said kind of independently, that, they thought that the financial planning realm would be good for me because I'm a decent teacher and maybe I have a trustworthy face. I don't know. So that was, an epiphany. And I decided to kind of pursue those avenues, really not knowing anything about the industry at all, like what a CFP was or, how it all worked. So I started interviewing with a lot of the big wirehouses, and I got like that. I just got not a great feeling. I got a yucky feeling about them just putting me through the buzzsaw and, basically opening as many accounts with, cousin Charlie and Aunt Janine and all that kind of stuff. So I just didn't get that warm and fuzzy. And I reached out to a Naval Academy grad that was located in Baltimore. And I said, hey, through kind of one of our networking things. And I said, hey, I'm looking for some career advice. I know that you have your own firm here in Baltimore, and I'm just wondering if I could pop in and ask you some questions. And I did. And at the time he was kind of looking for an assistant, and he basically advised me to kind of go the independent route, and that my feeling of, kind of that buzzsaw mentality was probably pretty accurate. And he offered me kind of an assistant job to learn the ropes, get licensed and all those types of things. And that was really my first foray into financial advising, which was in a fee-based environment. So that's kind of the long roundabout story of how I went from West Point to financial advisor.
What an incredible path. And thank you for your service. I know it sucks to get hurt. I did the same thing, got hurt before I was able to actually deploy, which, and it sucks whenever you're like, oh, I served, and people are like, oh, where'd you deploy to? Like, I didn't. So you have a friend that has done that as well. But it's actually interesting, some of the different jobs that you've had. It's fascinating to see. It's fascinating to know how some of those things happen, because who knows how boxes literally move from point A to point B. Those are things that we take for granted, that my Amazon box appears every 2 days, and I get ticked off if it takes an extra day. But all the pieces that go into that, I'm always fascinated by those jobs, just because there's just so much that happens that we have no idea, that we take for granted. But I'm assuming you learned a lot, right, around management and leadership and just organizational philosophy and management, all of those pieces, which I suspect has contributed as you've gone out on your own. Yeah,
I sure did. And it was funny because when I was hired in, most of my peers were kind of my parents' age. And, the first 6-8 months, I kind of learned the ropes, because I walked in and I joked, I'm like, I didn't even know what a forklift was, what a cardboard box was, but I have a brain, and, I could basically read reports and figure out, okay, if we're at the bottom of the network in terms of our productivity, how do we get to the top and really do it in a way that is, maybe somewhat tactful, but also where I just go ahead and act and then ask for forgiveness later. So I kind of skirted that line a bit, but to get people to move that, have always done things a certain way, and that was kind of some of the dialogue that I wouldn't allow. I was like, well, this is how we've always done it, Tim. So why are we doing it this way? I wouldn't really allow that. So, it's super interesting, and it's obviously a lot different environment, working in the civilian world versus, in the military, how to get people motivated, right. between the two. But absolutely. And I actually love the business. I love figuring out the puzzle. I love working with people. I love, seeing people that are working for me get promoted. That for me was what I really, really enjoyed. And I think the problem was that the business didn't love me in a sense that, and I'm actually feeling this a little bit now. We were talking, off mic here before we started about like just being busy. And, I think one of the things that I am not good at is protecting my calendar and saying no, or saying, basically, there's a kind of a lead time for that. Because, and when I was at that company, basically the packages are always moving. So if a truck came in on a Sunday, in California, to be unloaded, I was like, yeah, no, not like I'm that guy. Like I'm going to step up and I'm going to make sure that it's taken care of. But at the same time, like you need balance between obviously your professional life and your personal life. And for me, I was always apt to say, yeah, I got it. No problem. And I think that definitely can hinder you as time goes on.
Yeah, you make a great point around motivating folks in the military versus motivating in the business world, because you don't have the threat of lack of sleep and push-ups until
right, exactly.
I swear I still have nightmares of the drill sergeants yelling, you do push-ups till I'm tired. Like, I don't know. I don't understand. Yeah. But, it is different. And learning how to motivate people, I don't think folks are just naturally gifted at that. I do, and maybe there are some that are, but I don't think it's just like an innate thing that you're born with. I think it's a skill that you have to learn, both motivating team members or employees or whoever, or as well as clients. Motivating clients is even more challenging, because sometimes I feel like we're even more vested in just like, we did all this work and we really want you to follow these recommendations because we know it's what's going to be in your best interest. And yet getting clients on board with that can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. And I think what I look for in clients is I look for those that like really like yearn for that structure and yearn for that accountability. We talk about, I think Michael's talked about it at length about you only have so many spots on your bus, and being able to work with people that choose to better themselves is something that is super attractive to me for sure.
Absolutely. So you went to the hybrid firm, and sort of what was your experience there? Were you able to learn a lot and sort of get the foundation that you were hoping for?
Yes and no. My mentors, my first mentors in the business were great, but I think like so many of other people that have come on the podcast, like I wanted more, and I felt like when I came on, the idea was, in theory, I was going to be the heir apparent. Like, we've heard this story before, broken record. And, he was towards the, he is towards the end of his career. And, I was a younger guy, about 25, 30 years younger, and I would eventually want to take over, his firm. And, it started out where I was very much, administrative and doing a lot of the back end work. And I learned a lot in that aspect. And, as I was, learning that, I was studying for my Series 7, 63, 65 life and health and CFP. I was able to finish that, a little bit more than 2 years. I was able to kind of get that knocked out. But I felt like I wasn't like, I feel like I had to press to be put in production. And then I felt like I had to press to, kind of be replaced in the administrative role. And it was something that, bugged me. And I found that I was yearning more coaching. I was yearning more of what this business was really about. And it was kind of like, you take the theory and what they teach you. I went through the Kaplan course for basically all of my materials. And then I'm trying to figure out, okay, this is what the book says, but how do I actually do this in practice? And,
right.
The way that, it was definitely an old school mentality in terms of like, we're going to charge like literally nothing. I think it was like, $300 for a financial plan. And then we just wait for the assets to come in. And, I had already kind of begun to gravitate towards a younger demographic, a Gen X and Gen Y demographic. And, that could be a long, long time that you're waiting. So, from a profitability standpoint, it just didn't make any sense. And, it wasn't until, and I think I've told you this story, kind of offhand, it wasn't until probably about a year and a half into the industry, which tells you how siloed I was, that I actually found out about fee only. And I found out about fee only from my older brother, who had interviewed you, I think, because he was, he's an entrepreneur. He was looking to develop, software as a service to for the financial planning industry. And I think he came across you and what you were doing. And my brother, after talking to you, he said, "Hey, do you know anything about like XYPN network or fee only?" And I'm like, "No, he's like, "How do you get paid?" And I'm like, "I'm fee based. Like I get paid. And these are all the 30 different ways that I can get paid." And he's like, "No, you need to be fee only, man. Like this is the better way to do it." And I'm like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, don't tell me how to run my business, guy. Like, he's my older brother. But then actually, when I actually like Googled it and looked at it, I'm like, oh my goodness, like I can't continue on. Like I got to do it this way, because if I'm the consumer, that's how I would want it. So that's kind of my path to discovering fee only. And then at that time I was, again, gravitating towards that younger population. And then due to some circumstances with who was coming on as clients, I was listening to the podcast, and, you guys were, talking niche. So everyone out there, take a shot, niche. And I looked at my practice, and probably about 70% of my practice they were young pharmacists. And that was because I had a classmate who he lives right around the corner from me. He moved to Baltimore, and, he was one of the reasons why I came to Baltimore. His wife was a pharmacist and just plugged me into that network. And that was kind of another epiphany I have. I remember I was driving back and forth between Baltimore and Ohio, visiting my sister. And we were, I was listening, I was just cramming the XYPN radio. And I'm like, if I'm going to launch this firm, why am I not going to niche down to pharmacists? And that was like, okay, now I'm going to do that. And I basically, ate the niche sandwich and haven't looked back since.
Oh man, what an incredible story. I remember the conversation with your brother, because every now and then I would get emails from, tech entrepreneurs that were looking at, building software. And so he was looking for a problem, right? And he was interviewing me to say like, okay, what's the problem that I could help you solve? Because we have many of those in financial planning that we need help solving. And it's so crazy that was the path to discovering fee only, was your techie brother who didn't know any different until I guess he talked to me, and I can be a bit of a loudmouth about it. But yeah, so tell me more about sort of discovering this niche, in many ways by accident, of pharmacists. So you were still at the fee-based firm at that point, and just, again, like you just meet one, so then you meet more kind of thing? I mean, and it just sort of it snowballed from there?
Yeah, so exactly. So I kind of, people talk about, how to figure out your niches. And I was one of those people that I kind of just tripped and fell, it hit me in the face, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do this. And yeah, so the story goes, it's like Army, Navy, 2010, we're in the midst of the long losing streak, which your brother's a grad, right? A naval. Yeah,
he is.
Yeah. So I have some angst against some Navy grads. So I'll tell you a side note, and I don't know if you can cut this out. We do Airbnb. I'm a big proponent of my clients thinking of, especially if they have big, hairy, audacious goals, to figure out ways to generate side income. Last year we did Airbnb, and we basically paid for a trip to Disney in Brazil. My girlfriend's Brazilian, just through Airbnb bookings. And our most recent booking was a Naval Academy grad that wasn't kind to our house. So aside from the rivalry, I'm kind of in a dark place with Navy right now. But anyway, so I'll set the stage. I'll set the stage for the kind of the niche story. So it's 2010, 2011 ish. And my buddy just moved to Baltimore. I was still living on the West Coast, and I came back for the game, and we watched it. And that night he met at a bar between classmates and friends. They had mutual friends. He met his future wife. and who turned out to be a pharmacist here in Baltimore. And then you fast forward a few months and years, and they become one of my first clients and really kind of champion my cause. You talk about like people that just get behind you and support you, and it just seemed through her and through them that the clients that I was coming on, and I was tripping and falling and stumbling. I think my first year I might have made like $10,000 or $15,000 worth of revenue. I'm talking about like that first half year, so it wasn't great, but as the business started to mature, and I'm listening to the podcast, I'm like, man, I have all these pharmacists, like maybe I have something here. So once I kind of decided to run with that, then everything that I put into the new firm was about pharmacy. So I did like the 1,000 cups of coffee where I would just say, hey, you're a PharmD, can we basically, I want to do research. I want to understand like what's most important to you. And, if you think like a firm like this would succeed, and I really kind of put the research. So I did a lot of those. And, the pain points that I was hearing was, and this is very similar to, a lot of young professionals, which, is I think an important part to circle back to in a bit. But, it's, hey, Tim, like I am overwhelmed with student debt. I am confused about this whole thing called investing and saving for retirement. I'm frustrated that I can't, maintain a budget. And I'm kind of, I'm also kind of frustrated that I make a 6-figure income, but I feel like I'm not progressing financially. So, and that to me was, we talk about tight shot groups in the military when we're at the firing range. These were these tight shot groups worth of issues. And I'm like, man, I think if I can build a practice around those things and really put those forward and find solutions for that, then I have something here. So that's what I did. I basically, the name of the firm is Script Financial. So like prescription. The R is an RX in the logo. So it's definitely very evident, I kind of even named my different services, comprehensive financial planning would be like Legend membership. So a Legend is a drug that is prescribed by a doctor, that type of thing. And so I was all about it. And I think, it's really paid off for me, because I think some of the things that are happening now with the firm would only happen, I think, if I was down in the niche and doing my thing. So it's been a good ride.
You mostly answered my next question, which was just sort of what makes, pharmacist situations unique. Because a lot of times we talk about like, oh, you can niche to work with doctors or professional athletes or airline pilots. And sometimes they have unique situations that are just because of their compensation structures or what they're going through. But it sounds like pharmacists really have sort of this common set of issues that they're dealing with, which is not necessarily mutually exclusive to pharmacists, but what's unique is the combination, I guess, and that it is high student loan debt. They don't start earning money until they're basically 30 or even older, because pharmacy school is 4 years after undergrad, and they don't make as much money as doctors, right? The salaries aren't that high; they're not making $400,000 or $500,000, and so, like I said, and they're busy, right? Yep. It's prescribed a lot of drugs, so they're working long hours, and so just that unique combination gives you the opportunity. It sounds like to really be able to speak their language and know the issues that they're dealing with.
Yeah. And I think it's even more of a kind of a head scratcher too, because like even a lot of my friends in Baltimore, like, are pharmacists. So like if 10 of us go out, on a Friday night, probably 8 of us are pharmacists, and I'm like the black sheep, So it's like, why am I not doing this?
You're all in. You only hang out with pharmacists.
It's crazy, And we actually make jokes like when there's like me and an engineer there, it's like, oh, like we're ruining the average. So it's definitely like an emergent thing. But I had some naysayers, and I got to call out my buddy Ryan. When we first started, he was in my study group. He's like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, I'm going all in. He eventually kind of went down the same road with physicians, and he even has a better story because his wife is a physician. So, I think the question is like, well, don't you restrict yourself? And I'm like, well, like when I first started the firm, I feel like I was getting more non-pharmacy clients, and prospective clients would ask me, they're like, well, I see you kind of go after like medical professionals or pharmacists. Like, what's that all about? And I don't shy away from them. I'm like, that's who I openly market to. But again, if the issues are, if you're an engineer or if you're an attorney and you have, you feel overwhelmed with debt and trying to figure out investments and budgeting and all those things, then you can be a client of mine. I think the difference for me is that I feel like because I talk and I'm part of pharmacy associations and I read a lot about pharmacy, just about the industry and, where it's going. I feel like I can hold my own and talk to a pharmacist, and have them understand that I kind of know about their industry and where they're coming from and where they're going. And I think that to me is the differentiating factor. And like I said, it's one of those things where I just signed a business partnership with two other guys named Tim Albrecht, who is in Florida. He's the associate dean of Northeast Ohio Medical University pharmacist, and Tim Church, who's a pharmacist down in Florida. He works for the VA. And Tim Albrecht and I actually met via Twitter, which is similar to, I think, you and Alan. And he's a pharmacist who had like $200,000 worth of debt, and he basically realized that he was broke and he paid it off, and then he started writing about it. So he's kind of like, this guy that has really found a following, and there's a thirst in the pharmacy community because that's not something we're taught. And him and the other Tim wrote a book called The 7-Figure Pharmacist, which basically is kind of a personal finance book for pharmacists. And I helped write the foreword on it. And the three of us are kind of coming under your financial pharmacist brand, the Tim Albrecht Tim. And, we're blogging, we're podcasting, we have a strategic deal with the American Pharmacy Association. Really? I had a webinar last night, Alan. I had a webinar with 195 registrants. I'm talking about like Tax 101. So I think that the firm is set up in a way that, I think it's going to, it really identifies, or I think it's starting to identify and gain traction with that demographic of people. And I'm just excited about the prospects of where it can go.
Oh man, there are so many pieces that I want to dig into. So first off, for listeners, I do not recommend going into business with two other people of the same name. It just gets confusing.
Very much so.
However, there's probably a Tim cubed branding opportunity that you have there. So tell me more about this partnership. So is it sort of a new entity that's separate from the financial planning firm and from their blog and their book that's sort of just co-marketing and then sending business to the three entities? Or is the plan to sort of merge them all together into a single business? So then you'll have business partners for the RIA as well. Yeah.
I think, Alan, the latter is ultimately, I think, where we're going to go. So I think, what many advisors will do, and I think I've seen more and more people do it, is that they have the RIA and then like they'll blog and do that as kind of a drawer into the RIA. And we're doing that in a similar way. But, the other thing would be like an online class. Is like we're leading not with the RIA type of stuff. It's some of this other I guess services. So I guess the way it is now is that we have the RIA and services, and that's separate. And then we kind of have YFP and kind of the contract with American Pharmacy Association. And we're developing an online student loan course and a few things that we're doing in that regard. And then they have the 7-Figure Pharmacist book. And I think eventually the move is to probably rebrand and have everything under one umbrella. And I think one of the things is, the main thing out there, and, we've sought counsel on this, is, protecting the fee only and all that stuff. And, one of the things is to get them licensed and to be able to like kind of enjoy it and all that. So I think that's we're at phase one where we're kind of aligned and we're all kind of promoting the different brands and the different services. And the idea, I think, is to have basically your financial pharmacist brand that basically, if you're a pharmacist and you are in the States, you can come to us for a blog, a podcast, a book, all the way through to, very much climb the Russell Brunson value ladder all the way up to comprehensive financial planning. So that's kind of the vision of ours. So we always joke about dominating where finance and pharmacy intersect. So that's kind of our goal.
That's fantastic. It's really the benefit of having a niche that, again, it's hard to describe. Like, it's hard for me to say, oh, if you get a niche, you'll have this opportunity show up. However, this is a great example of, you have no idea that this is what's going to happen when you launch your business and have a specific niche focus. But it is that suddenly you meet two Tims that are focused on pharmacists and helping pharmacists build wealth that are, probably phenomenal marketers and have this sort of content machine, if you will, which is, that's how Rick Edelman and a bunch of the other very, very large firms have been built, was on the back of content marketing, essentially. They did it with books, but going blogs, podcasts, that sort of thing, in order to draw in the business. But these are the opportunities that only present themselves when you're willing to put your stake in the ground and say, I'm the expert on this situation. Because if you actually read like pharmacy industry publications, I didn't even know those existed. I guess I could have assumed that, right? But like, I've never seen one. I'm never going to read one. And if I have clients in 15 different industries or 100 different industries, I can't possibly try to be an expert on all of them. So it really does give you the ability, I think, to be more efficient. But it's opportunities like you had last night. I mean, doing a thing with the actual pharmacy association with 150 pharmacists on a webinar. That's huge.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I don't think those opportunities, maybe 10, 20 years into my career, if I eventually but I think the partnership with the Tims has just accelerated. And I think like the problem, Alan, is that, same with like personal finance, we're not taught, like my clients are very educated, but we're not taught anything about finance in school.
Sure.
And one of the problems that I'm seeing, and it's happening time and time again, is, I have a pharmacist that, that I talk to, and they're like, oh, I'm paying for this disability or this whole life policy. And, these are my investments. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, it's frustrating because maybe not as much as doctors, but they're definitely like the pharmacists are, I don't know if I can use that word, preyed upon.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because of the situation and because they'll immediately start in the world with a 6-figure salary that, it's one of these things where we're unwinding. So our hope is to kind of get as far upstream. So like I'm piloting things with, students and residents to kind of stop the bleeding with their student loans and then basically build a nice solid foundation. So when they're, our place, they have, a good framework in place to work off of. And we talk, we get a lot of feedback from the podcast from pharmacists that are a little bit further along that say, man, if I would have heard kind of what you guys are espousing now and talk about loans and all this, like I would have saved thousands of dollars or not made this mistake. So that fires, and I love hearing the feedback from our listeners, and that fires me up because I think we've hit a nerve. And I think that if we can get further upstream and, we're having pharmacy schools reach out to us, pretty much on a weekly basis to come talk to them or do some type of webinar. And I think if we can kind of, talk about kind of fee only advising and not leading with a product and, making sure that the person that you hire has your best interest in mind. I think, if we can move, we talk about like changing things, like if we can move the needle in the pharmacy world, even a little bit, it's in an environment where salaries are increasing, but not at the level that the debt loads are increasing. So these topics are even more important because, the purchasing power of a pharmacist is diminishing a little bit.
And now you sort of glossed over the fact that schools are reaching out to you to come speak, which is totally different than the experience of most advisors who, even if they have a niche like this, they're trying to get into the school. So what has been the way, like how have you gotten in front of the folks at the universities enough so that they are calling you to actually come speak?
Well, and I have to give most of the credit to the other Tims because it definitely helps to have a member of your niche kind of legitimize your cause and believe in you and believe in what you're doing. But, Tim Albrick, he was kind of on the speaking circuit even before we kind of linked up. But I feel like the frequency of sorts has really increased because we have a more of a reach with the podcast and with the blog and those types of things. So, we look at our Lipson stats and we always joke that like, oh, we just reached this milestone. We don't know if it's good or not. But I think how we feel it more is not necessarily the stats, but like people that are reaching out to saying, hey, this is really like motivated or this has changed my life to take a more proactive approach towards my loans or towards my finances in general. And like, we've had some of those moments where we get these emails and it's like, wow, like it's almost like a little tearjerker in a sense that you have that effect on people and not to sound cheesy, but that warm and fuzzy that I was seeking and that I really wanted, like I feel like I have it in a sense with those types of things. And just when clients say, hey, like I feel so much better like working with you. And now that I have a plan, like that's what I love. So to circle back on your question, I'm going to give all the credit to the other Tims that basically, paving those roads, but I am happy and willing to forge ahead and get the YFP brand out there. And I think sensible personal finance practices out in front of pharmacists before, they make those mistakes that could ultimately prohibit their ability to build wealth.
It just goes to show that content marketing really does work. It's a long play. It doesn't happen overnight. And in your case, you shortcutted it a little bit by partnering up, but that's fine. I mean, not every financial advisor, in fact, most financial advisors don't have the skill set to do proper content marketing. I didn't really recognize that until we got a director of marketing at XY that just showed me how little I knew about marketing. And it's just incredible what the tools and just the expertise that's out there, and that it truly is an area of lifelong learning, but that it does work. But content marketing does not work for generalists, right? You have to have some sort of focus. People, when they come to your site or they listen to podcasts, they have to know it's for them. If you launched a podcast and just generically talked about the new tax code, that's very different and going to get a lot fewer downloads than if you launch a podcast talking to pharmacists about how the new tax laws are going to affect their bottom line directly. And even if it's the same content, it's just more catered. It's just catered to them, which I guess currently, so you said you have in the high 40s clients. How many of those, or what percentage of those, are pharmacists?
So I feel like when I launched, I was probably at like 65 or 70%. And then I think I got down, I think when I originally launched and I was out on like, XYPN and NATFA and all those other, I feel like I was getting more kind of local interest for people that watched John Oliver's video about fee only or whatever, and, wanted to talk to a fiduciary. So I think it dipped down to like 50%, but I think now I'm closer to 70% again, because we're starting to turn a corner now in terms of, where I was at, 1 and 2 clients a month, now I'm closer to 4 and 5 clients per month. And a lot of those are on the pharmacy side of things. So it's starting to really gain traction, like I said, and that, to me, that's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, so 70%. So that's huge. I mean, that is a very niche practice, as you're building out. I'm curious, sort of, what are the avenues that you're seeing? I know some of these partnerships are new, but I guess it maybe the last few months or the last year, sort of, which avenue is driving the leads and driving new pharmacists becoming clients, or is it pretty, spread across the board on all of the different areas?
Yeah. So it's funny because, like one of the things that I really did this year that, helped me transform, aside from the kind of the partnerships, was I invested in a sales course. And because I felt like I was kind of swinging and missing on the opportunities that I had. And, I didn't really have a system in place. And one of the things was like, hey, you got to diversify your prospecting. So I need to have, it's nothing new. It's kind of the same old, but it needs to be like center of influence meetings and networking and speaking, and along with the kind of the outbound marketing and all that kind of stuff. So it's been an array of things. So, I have some people that are kind of center of influences that just constantly feed me clients. And I think with some of the things that I've learned, I'm able to convert them and get them in the door a little bit easier. But just things like network after work, or, things that people maybe like will write off, like that, those have actually worked for me. And I do cold walk-ins to pharmacists. Like if I'm in a store, I'll go and talk to a pharmacist to just pick their brain. And I've gotten a client from that, believe it or not. So
that's incredible.
Yeah. I don't know. And for me, one of the things that I really want to figure out is, football programs, they talk about recruiting and owning their home state. So, Ohio State needs to own the state of Ohio. And I think for me, like I really want to have, productive relationships with, the state of Maryland and, Maryland Pharmacy Association and the 3 pharmacy schools that we have here. So just being involved in, that organization and volunteering where I can. I think ultimately, it's borne some fruit, but I think it will continue to be there. Because I think ultimately, if you're there to help and learn, that reflects, and and you're genuine about it, I think that reflects. And then when people are in that spot, they think of you. So I think it hasn't been just one thing. I think it's been diversifying, making sure that I'm doing those activities to be successful. And then when they're in the door, basically get them to that emotional state to where they feel like they need to make a change and come on board. And I think that's been the difference.
So talk to me about your service model. So you have, so you had mentioned that you have comprehensive financial planning and you've named it after things that the pharmacist will understand. But if I'm a new pharmacist coming to you, what are my options and different ways that I can work with you?
So before the Tims came around, it was basically a setup where I had comprehensive financial planning, which I'm one of the crazy income and net worth guys. So I will pound that drum till the end of time of why I love that model. But basically it is, I charge a one-time, initial planning fee and then a monthly fee based on income and net worth. So that's basically the kitchen sink, the all-in approach. But then I also have, and more so because of legacy clients, I probably only picked up one or two more clients like this, is the investment management. So it's, hey, Tim, the financial planning piece is great, but, I'm only comprehensive financial planning piece is great, but I just want you, manage my investments. So I do that on an AUM basis. And that's a very, very small part of my business. And then since the Tims came around, we've been, playing with, breaking out a student loan analysis, breaking out an investment analysis. So we're kind of going that for base, testing that for. And I've done a handful of those. And the idea, again, is to allow someone to show someone value and have them feel comfortable paying you, and then have them climb that value ladder as their, needs are uncovered. And, so we'll see a lot of advisors, they start out with a lot of, and then they contract kind of mainly one or two offerings. I'm kind of doing it the opposite way. I'm breaking apart my service a little bit. Again, my big thing is if I can do it in a scalable way, then I'll definitely try it and we'll see how it goes. But I think having the Tims there to help me then market and get in front of those people that have had kind of a limited scope engagement is one thing that made me feel comfortable to figure it out in a limited scope way.
All right. So I'm going to give you a soapbox to talk about net worth and income. And listeners may know, if they've listened to me talk about my business back in the day, I ran a net worth income model as well. And I really liked it. I felt like it was a little challenging at times to explain to clients, but philosophically, I love it. So I'd love to hear your sort of pitch for why you use it and why you believe it's a great fit for your clients.
So, I think I wrote a blog post, and I think we'll probably repurpose this on the YFP blog. I had really 7 reasons why I charge based on income and net worth. And to me, you hear pundits say, find conflict-free advice. I think Tony Robbins has said that in his book. To me, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as conflict-free advice. Even in the fee-only world, there is conflict of interest. But I think the income and net worth model does the best job of mitigating some of that. So the advice that I give, we talk about like wealth transfer and how, Gen Y is going to be set up with wealth transfer as baby boomers kind of age. And, so Alan, if you wake up one day and you have, you inherit $200,000 and you go to your client that charges you based on AUM, and they could still be fee only, it's going to be in his or her best interest for them to invest all $200,000 essentially, because a lot of people, they do a flat fee and then they have an AUM, basis points that they'll charge.
Of course.
For me, I don't care. That's going to hit your balance sheet. So if it's paying off debt, if you want to start building your real estate empire, whatever that looks like, I'm going to give you the best advice based on what your goals are. So we're a big proponent of finding your why and that type of thing. And how can I grow and protect your income and your net worth? So to me, it reduces conflict of interest. It aligns our interests. So again, the more money that you make. So I cited that example with Airbnb. The more money that you make and the more that you are worth on paper. So the assets that you own minus the asset that you owe, the better it is for both of us. Another reason is I think it's best aligned to comprehensive financial planning. So right now, like I could get you, right now everyone looks really smart because the markets are in fuego, but I could get you, theoretically, I could get you a 20%, a 20% return on your investment. But if you're paying 29% on $40,000 worth of credit card debt, and I'm not incentivized for you to get out of that, am I really helping your cause? We're just basically, shuffling the money around here. So to me, that's another reason. I think it's a better measure of progress and the value of a financial planner if I can grow your net worth and your income year over year and help you do that. And to me, it's tailored to the client and accounts for complexity. So someone who makes, $100,000 as a household is going to be a lot different than someone who makes $500,000 and there are some differences there, obviously, with student loans and some things. Can be a little bit complexity, but I think as a general rule of thumb, that's probably accurate. To me, it's proportional with client income, which I've just mentioned. And I think it grows steadily with income. Or with the client. So one of the things that I cite with prospective clients is, when I worked with clients in the past and I was under the AUM model, I would be managing, $50,000 of their investments, and then they would leave their job and roll over another $50,000. And now my fee is doubled, but I'm basically doing the same amount of work. So it's kind of that gradual, the way that I do is every 2 years we'll do an income and net worth calculation. And, hopefully their income has gone up. Hopefully their net worth has gone up. And, then we adjust the fee that way. So I just like it. And I think, again, to your point, it's tough to get there, but I think once the light bulb clicks for people, they're like, okay, that makes sense. And to me, the warm fuzzy is like just those things align in, income and net worth. The higher it is for the client, the better it is for the advisor. And to me, that makes the most sense.
So say that again. How often are you planning on reassessing the fees?
So my first so maybe you need to interview me after May of this year to let you know. But my first reassessment will be this coming spring. I'll have that conversation. But
okay,
one of the things I do is like I pound that drum often. So like when you log into your client portal with me, I mean, that net worth number hits you in the face. And I'm always talking about it when I bring on prospective clients, I tell them that, this is something that we'll assess every 2 years. So I've kind of set the table for that. But again, like I'm constantly talking income. I'm constantly talking net worth. I kind of drive investments down to the bottom of the list. I think many prospective clients come and think financial advisors are day trading all day. And I'm like, that's not my jam. Like I don't do that. So I think basically what I say is investments are one piece of the pie. The CFP board said there's 6 components of a financial plan. It's one piece of it, but for the most part, it drives, it stirs the drink for a lot of people because that's how they get paid. And I think that's the sizzle in the business is the investments. And I'm definitely a keep it simple, keep it really boring when it comes to your investments. So I tend to, knock the investments down a peg or two in my practice.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about how the conversation goes. I suspect you'll be fine. That professionals tend to understand, especially when they watch that net worth and that income go up, that's okay. That your fee is going to go up as well. I was just curious how often you plan to reassess, because my mistake was I tried to do it every year, and quite frankly, it was just obnoxious to try to reassess just because it's a lot of data, house value and loan value, some of that stuff. And in 2012, when I started, we didn't have the best account aggregation software to even be able to track all that. So it was a little confusing because what I found was clients cared a lot less about how I calculated the fee, and they wanted to know how much it was going to cost them and if they saw value from that. But from the flip side, I totally agree that I never felt conflicted. I never had to feel conflicted when I said, hey, I want you to pay down your debt, or I want you to save this money, because the net effect on their net worth was the same, right? It had the exact same effect. So I never had to worry that I was giving conflicted advice, because no matter how many times we say, oh, I'm not conflicted, if the difference in that $100,000 or $200,000 in that example is $2,000 in my pocketbook, especially when you're in your first couple of years of business, it's going to affect you whether you say it is or not. It's going to be there. So I'm personally a huge fan. So are you including house value, second homes, small businesses, 529 plans? Like, how are you handling some of those sort of edge assets, if you will?
So I do include the home, but I don't include. So I haven't come across really the second home situation quite yet. So I'm kind of, how it is with being an entrepreneur, it's kind of a work in progress type of thing. I think with 529s, like I do include those are on the balance sheet. Some of the other things like outside businesses, I don't necessarily include the value of the home. Obviously, I think, the way that I have it written is like, we'll take like the average of the different sources that are out there, and then we'll just have a conversation. If a client is really, adamant about the certain value of their house, I'm not going to stomp my feet on it. But I think it is definitely one of those things that as I go through it, it'll be an education. But, to me is to get, the bulk of obviously the core assets with checking and credit cards and investment accounts. And then I kind of have a roadmap in my head, but I haven't really sat down and said, this is exactly how it's going to be. And, I definitely don't want to do a whole lot of the one-offs, but in my mind, like I kind of have an idea of, I think where I want to go with it, but we'll kind of see it. I'm going to adjust it as it goes. If it doesn't make sense, then I'll definitely, you have to pivot out of it. But I think to me, the core concept of income and net worth rings true to me, and maybe even more so than my clients. I think they get it, but at the same time, it might be more for me than anybody else, which, I still beat the drum when it comes to income and net worth. But for me, I think I feel safe to know that, my conflicts are pretty much, minimal. And, that's kind of how I like to run the practice.
Yeah, the one that mentioned is small business. The recommendation I have heard is count the income, not the value of the business, because technically as a small business owner, that would be double counting because the value is based on the income. If they owned a $10 million company and we're taking $100,000 salary, maybe you reassess that. But as a small business owner, that would be double counting essentially. So can you tell me, so you're 2 years in, that first year sort of slowly ramped. This last year has been really quick. Can you share with me sort of your income and revenue numbers from that first partial year and then this past full year, sort of where you closed out that first, full calendar year in your business?
Yeah. So the first kind of partial year, and I was definitely one of these guys that counted eggs before they hatch. Like I had a small book of business when I left my firm, and I probably converted about 50% of those. I think in my head, I was thinking that, 80 to 90% would come over. So that didn't necessarily happen. But again, the model changed. So before it was like, hey, pay me a small fee for a whole financial plan. But now I'm saying, pay me that fee like kind of per month. So for some people, it didn't like really make a whole lot of sense. But that first year, my revenue was about 17,000 for that May to December. From basically the full year of January to December of 2017, it was just a shade under 65,000 in revenue. And my expenses kind of, I think, trended a little bit higher. My expenses were just over 15 because I think I invested more towards kind of like the sales training. And, I feel like I tested a lot of different pieces of software out. And so those are something that I'm continuously looking at to drive down. I think some of the projections I'm doing, I have raised my fees. I think, I don't know, the third or fourth time since the practice has been open. I think my goal is to basically hit the 120,000 mark this year. And okay. I'm pushing for 150. That's the goal.
All right. Well, congratulations for one on growing so fast. And I think you've positioned yourself well, given this partnership with the Tims and just sort of actually, putting your stake in the ground and saying what your focus is going to be is huge, as you're going forward. Now, you're not so far removed from the first year and a half. Obviously, you're having a lot of success, but you're not so far removed to not remember the painful moments. So have there been any times sort of in the first year and a half where you've made some big missteps or big mistakes that, listeners that are thinking about starting their own business could learn from?
I think, make sure if you're going to start your own business, I would say whatever the number is in your head that you need in reserves, I would probably double it. It's just one of those things that to run a business like that, even though it's, you feel like there's not a lot of overhead, I feel like there is, a good amount. So I would say, it is one of those things that you're going to want to, and I know you talked about it, Alan, is make sure that your own personal finances are set and you're doing what you need to do in that realm of things. I think for me, is I guess I underestimated how much it would affect me when a client would be like, no, bro, not going to do it. I'm not going to come on with you. I'm not feeling it, because you're like, this is my baby. This is my thing. It wasn't where, before when I was working for someone else, someone would say no. And I'd be like, well, okay, well, I'll get them next time. I think since I started the firm, I've taken some of my failures a little bit more personally, because I can't really look and point the finger at anybody else.
Right.
So I think it's that whole mantra of keeping an even keel. So like, even when it's really good, it's not as good as you think it is. And when it's really bad, it's not as bad as you think it is. I think for me, it's second guessing myself in some points, or second guessing my pricing, or some of those types of things. I think if you have conviction of what you're doing, and you're actively trying to help people, and you have a message, and you have a kind of a compelling message, it'll come around. But I think it's definitely a grind, and it's one of those things that you got to work at. And so as far as like big failures, I don't know. I guess looking back, I wish I would have took some of the sales training stuff that I took earlier. I kind of, when I started in this business, I said, like when I was looking at it, when you Google questions to ask your financial advisors, I think the two biggest hits are you fee only, or how do you get paid? Are you fee only? And are you a CFP? So I checked both of those blocks, and then I'm like, well, and then so when people come and work with me, I can sell on the good guy mentality. I'm a good guy. People will buy from me. That is not true. That's not the case. Like, I think you need to put people in an emotional state where they feel that frustration. They feel that they feel overwhelmed or too busy or whatever it is to get them to move. And for me, that was one thing that I had to learn. And I learned, I'm glad I did learn through pain of not getting, people converted into clients. But at the same time, like, I feel like what I've learned in that realm has been monumental, and I think it's really helped my practice a lot.
What sales training program did you go through?
When I was in the process of launching my firm, I reached out to a lot of fee-only advisors in the area and picked their brain. And two guys named Jeff and Damien, who own Buttonwood in Baltimore, Buttonwood Financial Advisors, they've kind of taken me under their wing and have kind of been great mentors for me. And one of the things that they put in front of me that they use, a Sandler sales system. So McDonald Consultant Group here in Baltimore, Maryland has a training center. And I went through like a 10-week course and work with my guy Rush, and basically he's a kind of a trusted advisor for me, and has whipped me into shape in terms of how to position myself and my messages and things like that. And that was come from another fee only, a little bit more of a seasoned fee only advisor that said, hey, do this. And it was probably one of the best investments, probably outside of coming on with you guys and starting my firm, that I've made so far. So been a game changer.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I'm a huge fan of sales training, the right kind of sales training. And I think a lot of advisors have either been through or know people that have been through the wrong kind. That's just, sign this contract before you get out of my office kind of thing. Or, I'll give you $1 for every name that you write down on this paper for me to contact. But there is a good, there are ways to sell and it not be creepy or uncomfortable. Like, you can be authentic and still sell your services. And quite frankly, as a business owner, you have to, because the folks that aren't willing to sell, they don't sell, and therefore they don't get any clients. So
I think it's kind of an unnatural thing. So people naturally avoid change. And when you are committing to a financial advisor, it's a big deal. So I think for people to move, it takes some work. And I think a lot of the training is just getting out of your own way and just asking questions and basically placing that prospective client in the pain funnel and just asking questions and having them basically spiral into that till they get to that emotional spot of like, man, I'm really pissed off about this, or I'm really frustrated by that. And then it's okay. Like, all right, I think we're making some progress here. So it's really about asking questions and not hitting them over the head with features and benefits and all that stuff that I think the normal sales, and I think that the thing for me too is the chase. So like, you'd have someone say, okay, I'll get back to you. And then you would never hear from them again, or you're going back and forth. I don't do that anymore. It's basically qualified, disqualified. And if they're disqualified, I move on, and to me that it sounds super simple, but the training is really, and being a military guy, I like systems. So I go through their submarine, which is, bond and rapport and upfront contract and pain funnels and all these things. And I just do it almost verbatim, and I put my own kind of spin on it, but it's been huge for me. And, I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah. And if your training was like a sales training course I've been through, we've had Nancy Blakey on the show a couple of times, who is my sales coach, but I suspect yours is similar, is that it gives you a framework.
Yep.
I think we think of sales as like, oh, let's just dive into this conversation and see where it goes. And the truth is you can actually have a system so that you can see where your system's not working. It's just like any other process. Back in your, or inventory or logistics management days, like you need to know the process for how A goes to B, who goes to C, so you can see where's the breakdown if it's not working, and where can you improve, and where can you make one small change. I was listening to, I think it was the E-Myth recently, And in that book, he gives the example of, if you work in retail and you say, hey, can I help you find anything? Everyone's going to say no. But if you ask, hey, have you been in here before? People will always respond. And then that sparks a conversation for, hey, we actually have a new loyalty program I'd love to tell you about. But you don't know if it's effective unless you know how, did you track the data for how effective, hi, can I help you find anything? Is versus, hi, have you been in here before? And just those little things. But actually having a process is just so important, even with sales.
Well, it's one of those, it kind of reminds me of, when I was doing my research for, pharmacy, and I kind of got to those pain points, I feel like I never really figured out how to communicate them. And when I get through kind of my upfront contract, which is more or less agenda, I kind of transition to where we kind of talk through pain, and I basically take that research that I did and I say things like, oftentimes when clients, or when prospective clients come talk with me, they share that they are, and then I kind of rattle them off and I use the pain words. They're overwhelmed, they're confused, they're frustrated. And when I say that, prospective clients look at me and they're like, they either start laughing or they say, check, 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 and check. I hit them so then I ultimately build credibility. And then I think I start to, soften them up and really open it up because they're like, okay, well, my niche, and basically, from there I start to ask very pointed questions and get them to kind of, unveil kind of what they're, because oftentimes when you ask people questions, it's very surface answers and you have to really drill down. And that's I think where you can kind of make connections and get people to, commit to taking the next step. So it's crazy. And it's funny because, I joke about this with Rush, my coach. And when he told me what it was and how much it cost, I'm like, oh, I can't do this. I'm just, I'm not killing it right now. And, I didn't feel confident that I should be outlaying that amount of cash. And, I was going to basically had a conversation that I was going to tell him no. And I got off the phone and I basically agreed to do sales training. I'm like, I need to know how to do that. I need to understand how he got me to a very firm no to now I'm doing the sales training. And it was the best thing in the world for me. And a lot of it was just, he allowed me to say no. And then from there I was like, all right, let's just do it. I'll figure it out. And, from there it's been a ride. So it's crazy. It's a great thing. And it's not something that one naturally knows how to do, in my opinion. It's definitely a learned thing.
Agreed. Well, I'm so thankful that you took the time to come onto the show. As we're coming to a close, I'll ask you the final question. And that is, if there's one thing that you wish you could go back and tell younger Tim, one thing you wish you had known then that you know now, what do you think that one piece of advice would be?
That's a great question. I think for me, I would say ask for help sooner. So I think, with running a business, it's difficult for some people to let go of things and we kind of talked about it a little bit here, Alan, where we're talking about it's very evident in a lot of ways how little I know about a lot of things. And I think for me is being able to say, okay, I can't do that. So I need to find someone else to do it. Perfect example is, I need to hire FAB encounters to do my books. I've been trying and I started with you guys and I put it off. And this is one of those things that have been hanging over my head and I just need to figure that out. And I think there's a lot of things like that, do what you're good at, and obviously the dollars have to make sense in a lot of things, but, there are ways to, get help out there and offload a lot of those non-essential tasks. And I think for me, I held on to some of those things from a financial perspective, but also from a control perspective, because I'm like, oh, well, I don't have my standard operating procedures. They're not complete. And, it's never going to be perfect. And, it's definitely one of those things where you have to work off an 80% solution and then figure it out as you go. So I would just say, let go a little bit and, it'll figure itself out.
I love it. I think it's such great advice. Well, Tim, thank you again so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom just about the last year and a half in business. And I look forward to hearing about how the next year goes for you, because I think you have a very bright future ahead of you. So thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Alan. I appreciate it.
Let Ruby help you turn rings into relationships. For a special offer, visit callruby.com/XYPN and use promo code XYPN or call 1-844-853-78 Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.